Welcome to Money in Tech. I'm Jered Kenna. We're here with Alex Waters, founder and CEO of CoinApex. Welcome on the show, Alex.
Hey, Jered. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Okay, so we're here to talk about CoinValidation, and what I really want to know about is could this have prevented this Mt. Gox debacle? So first, tell me a little bit about CoinValidation. What does it do?
Sure. So CoinValidation is a product we rolled out from CoinApex, which is our incubator. It basically, the goal there was we met a lot of businesses over the course of 2012, 2013 who had trouble getting banked, didn't know how to navigate the regulatory compliance waters. And a lot of those businesses just asked me, like, how do we do this? How do we do enhanced due diligence? So we set up CoinValidation as sort of this consulting / tech entity. The Bitcoin Foundation and Data, they do a lot of really good policy work and helping those businesses figure things out. But there wasn't really any tech at the time that would help people do KYC. So we spoke to some banks, we spoke to some people down in DC and businesses, and we came up with this sort of plan to attach all the KYC information that these businesses are already collecting, like name, date of birth, etc. It just wasn't being attached to the financial layer, basically the Bitcoin address of that user. So banks didn't like that because somebody could have a Bitcoin address on, let's say, Coinbase, for instance, and it might not be their address. So they could be KYCing, giving their name, all that information, but then the money was going to another person, and so that's a problem. And banks, typically don't endorse that. They don't like that. So we thought of creating this sort of centralized database where different businesses could send us like a user ID, the Bitcoin address for that user, whether they're KYC'd or not, and if that user owns the address. So there's no like user specific information there, or we're not looking for like real names or anything like that. It would just be a way for us to vouch for a business that it's like collecting the right information, and also for law enforcement, regulators to sort of have a central place where they could go to if they need to disperse information to those organizations, etc. About what rules to follow.
Go ahead.
So it's evolved a little bit. We had an article in Forbes that I think got taken out of context a little bit when it was interpreted by people. They thought we were trying to create whitelists or blacklists or create like clean coins, that kind of thing. I think the confusion was we named it CoinValidation because we just put coin in the name of all of our products, and it's really address validation. We're not tainting coins, we're not doing blockchain analysis. We're capable of doing it, I guess, technically, but that's not like our goals, it's not our prerogative. It's more just to help Bitcoin businesses be compliant here in the US.
So could this have been used to possibly audit an exchange? I mean, you could verify which addresses belong to an exchange, or is that fairly easy to do?
I suppose, I wouldn't want to take that role of being that entity that effectively polices Bitcoin. But going down to DC in our talks that we've had with people down there, a lot of people want to see Bitcoin be self-regulating. They don't want to have to stand up a new regulatory agency or create new rules or police Bitcoin. It'd be a lot better if the industry just sort of protected itself, so that regulators don't need to come in and put really strict things in place. So I was pushing more for that. There was a cohesion between companies in 2012 that I think has become disparate at this point, where I think there just needs to be a consortium, especially technically, like businesses communicating with each other via a database to say, hey, we've detected fraud with this Bitcoin address. You might want to do a higher level of KYC for that address on your system, etc. So we're trying to like set the ground floor for that to exist, but it's a slow process, and we anticipated it taking a long time. As far as
so how long have you been working with the regulators on this?
So I've been thinking about this and collaborating on it for about a year now. It didn't become a real entity until about, I don't know, October, November. And we didn't have code in place until October. But going down to DC, we've been doing that for maybe 3 or 4 months, and we go down fairly regularly, and it's basically just to say, hey, Bitcoin is just not used for bad things. We're trying to allow users to have an option of, you know, self-identifying so that they can, for whatever reason, we like the idea of people having the option of either using their money anonymously or using it transparently, and not preferring one or the other, but providing the option to do both. So that's what we're trying to create. As far as policing like Mt. Gox or saying, you know, Mt. Gox stole these coins or something along those lines, I do push for transparency with depository institutions. I think if you're operating a Bitcoin exchange, it would be wise for you and prudent to show that you're not acting as a fractional reserve. You could do that quite easily by just saying, here's the address for our cold wallet, or you know, having some sort of outside party audit you, something potentially like CoinValidation, where we could go in and vouch for these guys, say they have strong security, they're holding the assets that they claim to be, but I don't think it's there yet. I think it will be there because there's a competitive advantage to that. If I'm a Bitcoin user, I want to use one of those exchanges that are more transparent. So I think it'll get there eventually.
So how has it been working with these regulators? And do you think this involvement will go very far? Do you think they're going to really push it ahead?
I mean, I've been tacitly more of an observer role. I have had some interaction federally and state level, but I think for the most part, they're doing a pretty good job. Granted, I know a lot of people disagree with that. If you look at Bitcoin existing in the political sphere, it's something that could potentially be scary. It could create polarizing issues, etc. So it's hard to take a stance on something like that. And I think so far they've been pretty proactive. They're very knowledgeable about the space. We look at like Ben Lawsky here in New York. The guy really understands Bitcoin, and I genuinely think his heart is in the right place in that he's A, trying to protect consumers, B, trying to be diligent as a regulator. You know, that's sort of their job, is to, that's what they're tasked with, is ensuring that fraud and just bad things are not going on, money laundering, so, you know, quote unquote bad things. But, you know, that's what he's tasked with. So I think with that task, he's at the same time very pro-innovation, very pro-Bitcoin in a way. And so I think, you know, I don't envy his position, but I think they're doing a pretty good job of just being proactive about it and understanding the importance of Bitcoin. But at the same time, they have a lot of pressure on them to make sure that it's not taken advantage of to get over on people, basically.
So I completely agree with you, and I think the U.S. is taking a pretty good look at it, and especially Lawsky. But what about some of the other countries? I mean, we've got, you know, China, Russia, Thailand, Vietnam. They've come out pretty negatively. Obviously, Bitcoin is a global currency, a global protocol. How are you focusing on these other countries?
Yeah, so what I've seen in other countries, especially China, which I think is a lot of what I've seen come out of public perception of Bitcoin there, as well as the statements that have been made by government officials or people in banking. It seems to just be a repeat of what happened here in 2012. It's paralleling it pretty closely in that initially they put some brakes on it to try and figure out, okay, what the hell is this new thing? And then they started to become informed about it, and they said, okay, well, we can loosen up on some of those brakes. And they're trying to just understand it and have informative dialogue. I think they realize the potential that's there with Bitcoin, and I think politicians, regulators, people in banking are just cautious and trying to move slowly so that they don't make a mistake in fully embracing it if it's not good for them, basically. So it's a challenge, but I see a lot of the actions and behavior and statements being made paralleling what happened here in the United States about a year ago, and it's just like the same thing is playing out just a year behind. So we're here trying to figure out the solutions to all these problems as they come up, and then I'd like to sort of carry that over internationally as we find solutions to problems here.
So not too long ago, Senator Manchin wrote a letter calling for a ban on Bitcoin. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's upsetting because Bitcoin is an amazing thing. It's a beautiful technology. At the same time, I can understand that the public perception is not well informed. Our biggest challenge with Bitcoin is educating people about it and just diplomacy. So having healthy dialogue, conversation, statements that are so extreme and saying we should ban something when you don't clearly understand it fully is, to me, rash. And it identifies both something that I want to work on, which is creating more dialogue, bringing more information down to DC where it's badly needed. But it also identifies the cultural perception amongst some people that Bitcoin is bad. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the media that we've seen. It's very sensational. It draws upon negative things because that's dramatizing, and it's unfortunate, but that's the battle we fight.
And we also did get Representative Jared Polis's reaction, which is possibly the most hilarious thing to ever come out of Congress when he called for a ban on the dollar, the physical dollar.
I was a fan of that.
It's easily stolen and copied.
Yeah, that guy has some gall. I mean, that was quite cool of him to make such a funny statement. I mean, it's satire, but it's true. I mean, it's effectively the U.S. dollar. The reasons that Senator Manchin stated for their necessitating a ban on Bitcoin is effectively the same thing for why the U.S. dollar should be banned. I mean, it's guilty of the same things.
Right, and I think if it were invented today, nobody would want to. None of these banks or regulators would want it around. It's just a legacy left over.
Yeah, it's cash. I think cash has utility. I think dollar bills, physical. I'm not to say that. Who am I to judge to say that the U.S. dollar is bad or that its utility is legacy and we should replace it with something else? There might be somebody out there that prefers it, just likes physically tangible items. I'm more focused on providing choice, so giving people options, and not banning one thing or the other, but just allowing things to coexist.
So it seems like there's somewhat of a schism forming in the Bitcoin community. I mean, you've got one half that is all about regulation and getting the big banks and the mainstream, cash economy involved in this, and then the other half wants to keep it as private as possible and destroy the Fed. Are you worried about upsetting those people?
Yeah, I think that this topic that we're talking about is a very polarizing one, and the problem is that Bitcoin was created to, part of Satoshi's white paper touches a lot upon the idea of removing trust from the system, and removing middlemen, removing the necessity of organizations to facilitate money transfer or value transfer. A lot of these things in principle I think are phenomenal and forward thinking, maybe 20, 30 years can be realized. But in the time being, there's a growth that has to occur, a transitional period for that to occur. So in principle, I like a lot of those ideas, and then I focus on what can we practically accomplish in the day, the week, the month, the year. So this polarizing item is basically, do we want to attach identity to our Bitcoin transactions? The reason people might want to do that is because U.S.-based businesses are required by law to collect certain kind of information for certain kind of transactions, and it's a difficult thing for them to work with Bitcoin if it's the Wild West, if it's the underweb, if it's the dark web. I want Bitcoin because I believe Bitcoin is a phenomenal technology that's going to change the world in a positive way. I want it to be used by everybody. I want it to be available to the masses. I want anybody to have the choice of using Bitcoin. And part of that mission is allowing businesses to accept it, or helping businesses to accept it, and so that also allowing them to do that legally, so that the operators don't go to jail, so that they don't have to shut it off because of their bank saying, hey, we can't bank you. So it's a hard path to go down. You can't be right. We've just taken the position of trying to provide choice to people.
Excellent, man. So did you actually expect Satoshi Nakamoto's real name to be Satoshi Nakamoto? And do you even believe that we've got the right, or I should say Newsweek has the correct Satoshi Nakamoto?
Satoshi, I believe, is whoever created Bitcoin, I think, is a phenomenal human being for their contribution to the world. My understanding is that person wanted to remain private, and I respect that a great deal. So I really don't want to comment or give any dialogue to who Satoshi is, who he could be, is this the real Satoshi? I don't think it's relevant. I think what we have here is Bitcoin. It's a beautiful thing. Where it came from, I don't think is as important. It might be good in some respects for people to say this guy created it, because when I'm down in DC, or when I'm meeting with certain people who are extremely skeptical of Bitcoin, they say it's magical internet money created by an anonymous anonymous person. We don't know who created it. So it might help with that, explaining it to them, wrapping their head around it, that somebody did create it. They're a humble person. They don't like the spotlight, and they gave it away. I think that's a cool story, and that could help. But I don't, I really try to avoid talking about who Satoshi is or why they created any of that. The guy wanted to be private. It was very clear, and I don't want to, disrespect that.
So is there anything that people can do to help, or any message that you want to get out about CoinValidation?
Yeah, it's mostly an educative, diplomatic organization, and we'll probably turn it into a non-for-profit at some point. It's just it's hard to do that at the time being, because we're working on many things, and that takes time. And but at some point down the road, we'll probably turn it into a non-for-profit, and we'd like more involvement. It's just we're not there yet. The thing that would, I guess, help a little more is just for people to have informative dialogues with people. Tell people about Bitcoin. Say how it's not a bad thing. It's not used for bad things. It's something that changes the world in a positive way. There's a lot of cool stuff going on here in New York. We have this incubator. We're working on a bunch of cool things, some of which I can't talk about yet because they're not ready. But we're just trying. We're not about the money, status, or power. We're just trying to help Bitcoin along and bring it to the rest of the world. So that's what we're doing. And anybody that wants to help us, reach out, because we appreciate that.
Thanks for coming on the show today, Alex.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure talking about Bitcoin, and I appreciate your time.